Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be taking a look at NDI 5 Remote, which is a lightweight remote camera capability that's been added to the NDI 5 toolset. But before we get into that, I'd like to invite everyone, if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions or thoughts about the topic, please just post them in the comments below. Or if you'd like to join us live on air, we have a link in the show notes that will connect you to the studio, and somebody here will be able to get you on and running. So let's actually get started here. Remote is an interesting new tool in the NDI toolkit. So everybody's really been focused a lot on NDI Bridge, and that is an incredibly powerful capability that's being built into this new NDI 5. Remote is kind of the little stepbrother kind of application in the mix. What Remote will let you do is take a remote audio or video source that is visible to a browser, transport that over the web, and let you pull that into your production as an NDI feed with both audio and video coming from that remote location. So it is based on a technology called WebRTC, which has been around now for probably, the better part of 6 or 7 years in actual production situations, and is becoming pretty mature. So that's a great choice for technology. It's supported directly in almost every modern browser, including browsers in mobile devices, which means that Remote is not just able to take something from a desktop or a laptop PC, but also directly from a phone or a tablet. So that can be a very powerful attribute to how you can leverage NDI Remote. The thing to keep in mind, though, is NDI Remote is about connecting to a remote camera, not having a remote conversation. And that's really important because we tend to think, when we think of WebRTC, as a two-way channel where I can get something from you and you can get something from me and we can go back and forth. NDI Remote is specifically about taking a source, audio, video, and moving it into a studio. So it really has a different intended purpose from the conversational uses of WebRTC. So to get started, I'm assuming that if you've interested in this, you've already downloaded NDI 5. If not, that's at ndi.tv, and you can fill in the forms to get the download link sent to you. But if you take a look, once you have it down, NDI 5 has a new sort of start screen where you have all of the applications that are laid out that you can access through NDI. And down here is NDI Remote. And so we already have it open. So let me just pop this out of the way. And here is NDI Remote. It breaks into two sections. One is called My Connections. And in My Connections, it lets you set up, I believe, up to 8 individual links that you can give out to people that they can use to connect to you in your studio. The other piece is something called Incoming Connections. And an incoming connection is really the flip of this. It is the ability for somebody else to send you a link so you can bring them into the studio. And both of these are actually very powerful in different types of situations. So before I jump into how this all works, let me just check the message board here. So we have Rudy dropping in. Rudy, always great to see you. Thank you for joining us here. We have Peter from Berlin. Peter, thank you for coming in. I know it's late at night for everybody in Europe. We also have Samuel from Norway. Samuel, thank you again for being a part of the show here. So Peter F. just asked a question as we get into this. He said, what about WebRTC on Android/iPhone with HD resolution? I just get 720p in WebRTC. So I can't speak to it fully. WebRTC is not the limiting factor. Uh, in our products, we do 1080p through WebRTC from a browser into a production system. So that it's not the protocol itself. Any limitations would be limitations within the device that, what it allows you to access. So I know there are two things. So first, in most remote mobile devices, you have two cameras, and the front-facing camera can often just be limited to 720p. We've seen that with a lot of mobile devices, where the back camera can be 1080 or 4K. So they don't necessarily reflect the full resolution of the device, but simply if you're accessing a front-facing camera, that could be only 720p. The other can just be a limitation inside the software. So for the longest time, Macs were, if you use the FaceTime cameras, they were only 720p. So there's different things that are going to impact that resolution. But it isn't WebRTC itself, which is actually good news, because it means these types of technical solutions have a lot of room to grow. And we'll be able to leverage better input technologies for all of these. So thank you, everybody. Oh, before I won't, we have Dennis from Rhode Island. Dennis, thank you. We also have Kent. Kent, thanks for joining us. You're coming in, pretty regularly, and I definitely appreciate that. So we have Rodney. Rodney, thank you, from Tobago. So today we're coming from New Jersey, so our weather may be even hotter here than in sunny Tobago. So thank you for joining us, Rodney. I appreciate that. We have Kiran from India. Kiran, thank you. Mike, always great to see. And we have Guy also. Guy, thank you. So Guy is actually asking if we could bump up the audio levels a little, so we can see if we can take care of that. So thank you, Guy. So Mike actually, before we get in, asked another question. He says, is it possible to use NDI Remote to bring into vMix video and audio from a PTZ camera at a remote location? So quick answer is yes, but you would still have to funnel that PTZ camera through a web browser, because that's the only way that NDI Remote will operate. That is something I will actually demonstrate. So we have that scheduled for later here. So definitely something to think about, but you don't get PTZ control when you bring it in as a webcam. So you'd probably need another side channel to do the PTZ control. And at that point, it might make more sense to use something like SRT if you have to set up broader infrastructure. But something we can definitely dive into later in the show. So thanks, Mike. So, and Claudia, thank you for joining us from Brazil. And Hakan, thank you from Sweden. So I am really grateful for all of you guys for taking the time to come in and join us here. So thank you. All right, so let's get started here. So let's first start with My Connections. So the My Connections piece of NDI Remote is where you get to send out a link to a remote, potentially a remote camera source, a remote guest, however you'd like to phrase that, and they can then open that link in a browser and connect to your studio. So let's take a look at how this would normally be set up. So you can see we have, I believe, 8 available connections in My Connection, and they all can be active simultaneously. And what will happen is if I come in, we'll just set up a new one to give you a demonstration. You check the checkbox next to it to say, I now want to start using this as a connection. The next thing to do, and this is important because it's something we all forget over time, is set up a name. So if you want to set this up, this could be Studio D. So now I know when I send this link out, it's a link I sent to Studio D. So if I need to call that in, that will be how I'll be able to see that name. And with that said, I now have the ability to see the link that I can send them. And so this link, when you click on that little arrow in a box, is going to come up and it will be scrolled across here. You can also, and this is what I'd recommend, lost that. Just go and click on this little box over here, which is copy to clipboard. So you'll copy that link, and from there, you can then paste it into a text message, send it via email, whatever works best for you connecting with the remote guest. There is also a QR code here, so if somebody had a mobile phone, they could click on that and use that as a way to pull in the link. So lots of different methods, and you can also just leverage an email button here, which will forward the link through your own email with a pre-appended message around the link. So lots of different ways to actually send this link out. And when somebody opens this link, right now I have a couple that are already set up, so we'll do that for efficiency. So if I were to open that link, let me bring this over here and show you what it would look like. So this is just a webcam I have sitting up over here that's coming in through a browser. So not the greatest video source, but very typical of something if you just wanted somebody to jump in and say something quickly on a remote. But what I have across the bottom, so let me explain what you're seeing here as you look at this. The grid over here basically pops up lines, so you get a better sense of layout and proportion on the screen. And that will really give you sort of your rule of thirds grid to position somebody against. So that can be useful. This middle button is your NDI camera mute. So if I click this off, and you'll see this here, what I am doing now, it turns white, and the video feed that would be being sent out from this browser is shut off. You just get a freeze frame of the last frame that was sent out, and then when I click it, it will come back on. I have the same now with a microphone. This microphone is just mute and unmute, so it makes it very easy for somebody that may be talking or getting ready to talk to just mute themselves until they're ready to go on. This other button with the cameras and the rotating thing. So this can be confusing because in a mobile device, this is usually your way of switching between your front and your rear cameras. In this case, it'll show you all of the available video sources you have. And that can be really useful. If you go in, you have multiple camera sources and you can pick between them and you can even switch. So if there were a reason, that would be something that would be very easy to do. When you pick it, you just click on whichever one you want and you're done. The next is, if you're used to the NDI app, the mobile app that NewTek has released, what this will do is it will switch the resolutions and the bandwidth requirements for that app. In this case, it really is just a toggle between 720p and a 4.3, 480p. And so I am not sure. I mean, that was something that I was at least expecting, that if I had a 16:9 camera, it would go to something like 640 by 360, or an equivalent in different regional formats. So instead, it actually is cropping. It's giving me 640 by 480, but with the sides now cropped in. So I lose that additional field of view in the video comes in. So that would be something I would only use if I was putting somebody in a multi-box or in a corner shot like we have right here. That would work well there. But otherwise, I would probably, if bandwidth allowed, definitely stick with the HD resolutions here. So one of the other things, because I mentioned that you have different camera settings that you can use. So one of the things I found, which I thought was interesting, is if I pull up all my different cameras and then tell it to hide this bar across the bottom, I now have the ability to just click across these cameras. So if I wanted to do things that would let you switch between different cameras, you could do this here while still having a fairly open view of the screen you have here. So this is what the guest sees, the remote party sees, and how they interact with this. So let me just pull this aside. We have a few more things we'll talk about there, but I think, for right now, let's look at how we'd actually see this. So this, I believe, is my Studio A. So if I go up here, this is how we sent out the URL. This is the specific URL we need for that guest. This is how we open them up in Studio Monitor to take a look at the video that's coming in. So it takes a moment for this connection to happen. Okay, there we go. So now you can see, actually, it has me swap down to the 4.3, so let me swap that up. So this is now an NDI source that is coming out of the NDI Remote application and being fed into us locally here. So it's coming from the browser. So I'll lay this out. It's coming from the browser over here and being fed in through the web, and now this is coming out as NDI. So we have this as an NDI stream here. If you look, what we see is this is coming in. This is the studio computer we're using right here. These are all the different NDI sources we have that are associated with it. But now you can see these are the different studio feeds that we have set up. And so if I create a new remote feed for incoming, you'll see that in here as one of the studio feeds that are available. So this now can be used in any source that you need. So if you are using this as a remote camera in vMix, put it in there. It can fit into the TriCaster very comfortably. Anything that can take NDI, you get it here. So this is, this is a very powerful tool in that regard. So as I mentioned, you can have multiple of these open. So let me see if we have Studio B, which I believe is just another camera. So I'll show you the entire process here. If I copy this, which is clipping the link that we set up, and I go and let me open up Chrome over here, and I paste this in. You'll see there's the link. And so now this is another camera that I have sitting over here. And this, all the same controls, everything we talked about. But now if I come over here and click on this little monitor, I now have an NDI connection with Studio B. So here, just with what we set up here, I have two incoming NDI feeds into the system. And the resolution is certainly on par with the cameras that we're using to send this in. You can see the latency based on how I'm talking and the lip sync on this. But I think this gives you a good sense of just how easy it is to connect with somebody. So the other piece, let me sort of shut this down now. The other piece that I definitely wanted to talk about here, though, was for incoming connections. Now, what makes this different, technically, you're doing effectively the same thing. But what makes this different is now somebody remotely can send me a link that I will keep here as a, basically, as a placeholder. So anytime that person wants to connect to me, they can just use that same link. And it's them coming into me. So it makes that, they can bookmark the link and everything on their side and send it over. And one of the interesting things, so if you want to set up a remote link, you actually don't do it, it doesn't start over here in the NDI Remote application. It starts in the browser. So let me show you how that would work. So when you open up NDI Connect on the remote side, on the guest side, what you are actually doing is you're going to the URL. Now, let me pop a camera into here so this will sync up. So, I mean, I will just make the point that this is a pretty early technology still. So we've had issues where it's been temperamental on certain things. So keep that in mind. But I think the potential here is incredible. So definitely worth following on with what as this develops. But so now, if this were me remotely and I have this set up, what you have up here is something that is basically a long token, sort of what they call a GUID, a generated number letter combination that uniquely identifies this session. And so if I wanted to share this little arrow, just like we had on the remote side, the NDI remote side, when you click this, you get the opportunity to name the connection that you want to send. So I could say SA Studio, if this is what I wanted to do. And then I can say I want to copy that or I want to share the link. So I could do it through email or something like that. Or I can just close this out. So now, with this done, what I need to do, and I'll show you this, it's not necessarily because this would usually be from somebody remote. If I paste this link in here, you'll now see that this thing says receive call.html. So this is part of the URL that's being constructed. And when I just enter this, what it's going to come up with is this message here. Let me see if I can make this easy. So it says if you have NDI tools installed, launch NDI Remote. And when I do this, you'll now see that I've just added SA Studio into my incoming links that I can now join with. So if I were to look at this, open this up, this is now the camera down here that we just shut off and used as part of this link. So again, this can take a while to connect, and as I mentioned, they can be a little dodgy, especially with the incoming links. So I'm not guaranteeing this is going to work here, but I definitely wanted to do something where you at least saw the process on this. So I'm going to assume now that this connection isn't going to work successfully here, but hopefully you get the idea. This lets you set all this up as potential incoming sources that if somebody, for instance, were out in the field and had a camera at a trade show, like an iPhone, they would be able to just bookmark the link, and then anytime they wanted to send video in, they could connect to that link, open the page, and show up here. And again, this is something that I'm sure will improve over time as new iterations of this come out. But just keep that in mind. If you're planning on using this for a production, keep in mind that there are some limitations in stability right now, and that should be something you just use where you have a plan B behind it for right now. So the last thing that I just wanted to show, because it was Mike mentioned this at the beginning of the show, is connecting to a PTZ camera. So while I have this set up, let me see. So while I have this set up, this is something where we have a PTZ camera that is in a different part of the office over here, and it's just focused somewhere else. But it's a PTZ Optics 12x webcam, 12x camera, and it is definitely, you can control it locally to decide what you want it to show. But the point is that remotely, I don't have access to that camera. So actually, I think NDI Remote may be just causing me a little grief here today. So I'm not going to be able to connect that. But the way we had this set up is we have the PTZ Optics camera set up going through virtual webcam. And so that's coming in as effectively a webcam into the browser and then over here. So if I had a port forward or something, I'd be able to, stream that and control that. But, again, this is something that in these types of use cases, this is really just to show that you can use higher quality cameras, which give you a much better image than just the webcams I've been using. But, in these cases, I would definitely look at bridge or SRT for these types of remote camera connections. So let me jump back and catch up with everything that's been going on the messages. So let's see, we have Alessandro from Brazil, Alessandro and Claudier. Yes, Claudier, thank you. I appreciate both of you joining. So we have LakeCam TV. So LakeCam, hi, thank you for joining. And yes, LakeCam was also asking, is it still Windows only? Yes, it is right now, as far as I know. I know that they have been NewTek or NDI under WebRTC now has been working to give more comprehensive support to Mac, but I don't believe these tools are there as of yet. So definitely something to think about. So let's see, what else do we have? We have Very Scott. Would you recommend NDI Remote over vMix Call? Is quality as good or better? So I think, Very Scott, I think these are two very different types of WebRTC solutions. As we were talking about earlier, NDI Remote is a one-directional connection. So there's no feed going back. There's no mix minuses being generated if you have multiple feeds coming in. This is really just, think of it as I'm pulling a camera, a video, and camera audio from a remote location into the studio. So think of it as almost like a one-directional satellite feed. And so if you needed to interact with somebody there, that would be something where you'd probably just use a mobile phone with a earbud and be talking to them, say, okay, you're live now, and then they could just start talking. So it'd be very useful in those same situations where you'd have that sort of satellite truck one-way link going up. This could work well there. vMix Call is two-way. It does all the other things you'd want around a conversational connection there. So Claudier is asking, John, I have a question. Is it possible to communicate with the person at the link that I'm receiving? So yeah, we just covered that. Actually, it isn't. This would be something where you'd have to have a separate side channel to handle all of that. So let's see. So we got Maya from South Sudan, Africa. Maya, thank you very much for joining us. So good to have you here. So Kent is asking, is Bird Door Cloud using ND5 under the hood? So I know that the folks from BirdOrg are working to integrate NDI5 as part of this. I'm not sure if that's out in the release versions. Under the hood, BirdOrg Cloud is SRT, and they use that SRT to do the transport, and at the edges, they're converting that into NDI, and vice versa. They're doing an ingest through NDI and then feeding that into SRT to do the transport. Remote is doing similar, but using WebRTC. So Remote will ingest basically a webcam feed, take that in, transport it over WebRTC as the transport, and unpack that and feed that out as NDI on the edge. But because it's that one-way connection, you really don't have the same flexibility you have with BirdDog Cloud. So let's see what else. So the guest, Eric just asked, how can the guest have an audio video return? That is the big limitation. So I don't want to suggest that, Remote is a substitute for anything like, vMix Call or Live to Air or any of the other sort of WebRTC full-fledged solutions out in the market. It really is a way to pull in something remotely. That's it. Just it's not conversational. So Lake Kim is asking, will it work through Parallels? I do not know. So Parallels is basically a virtualization technology that would allow you to run Windows on a Mac. So I don't know how this would run under virtualization. If you find out, I'd love you to share that if that's something you're looking to try, because I'm sure there are other people with Macs that are thinking about that. Oh, and also, I mean, it's further clarified, it's Parallels Desktop 17 for an M1 Mac. So I'm not sure at all with an M1. I mean, one of the things which is sort of a blessing and a curse, the code that NewTek writes tends to be very low level. So it's an absolute blessing because it works great on lower end hardware and it leverages every ounce of metal that they put into those boxes. But the downside to that is that if you're dealing with anything that is at all sort of out of spec, a little different, virtualization being one of them, you may run into problems because it's expecting things sort of at that low level that just won't be available to it in a simulated environment. So let's see. Very Scott says, thank you, Very Scott. I mean, he was mentioning that these are helpful getting acquainted with vMix. So let's see. We also have the Al Andy Fitz. So Al Andy, thank you. Al Andy from Switzerland. Great to have you join us. So and Lake Cam is coming from Lakeville, Massachusetts. So up the coast from us in New Jersey here. So, sort of neighbors, at least coastal neighbors. So thank you. Mike is saying, do I know some examples of applications where NDI Remote would be ideal? That was Mike Grab was asking that. So probably the two cases where I could see this being very useful is if you had somebody out with a phone and you needed to just very quickly pull in something from them. If you didn't have vMix set up, if you didn't have anything else, all you really need locally is Studio Monitor. And with Studio Monitor, you actually can record an NDI feed. So this would be something where in a pinch and you need to get some footage in, you could actually just have somebody with a mobile device go out there, send you the feed in via remote, and you pick that up and record that in Studio Monitor for putting out on air at some future time, or just to capture because you want to edit it and do something with it. So I see something like that, but it would not be my first choice if I just wanted, if this were where I had time to pre-plan and set up. That may change. This may develop and evolve in ways that it becomes a lot more useful for the types of things that you're talking about where you currently use vMix Call or Live to Air. So there may be a footprint in that space that it is aspiring to, though right now, the use case I gave is probably sort of the best possible use case I would see. That or you just don't have any other option for bringing in somebody remotely. And you want to bring them in and you don't have somebody set up with OBS Ninja or anything. It works and it will get you there. So let's see what else. Lake Cam was mentioned, sounds like a lot of delay. Based on how anything is set up with WebRTC, there can be either very little delay. I know that based on the connection and the distance that we're going over the web, we can be anywhere from well under 2 frames to something where you're dealing with 250 milliseconds. So there can be a lot of variability in the latency. Typically, WebRTC will try to negotiate that to the best possible, but based on the connections and the other infrastructure, there are definitely potential limitations to that. So let's see. Lake Cam is asking, is this like network address translation, NAT? Not really. So what network address translation does is it pulls a public IP address and a port, and using that, it will route that to a private IP, one of the non-routable, non-publicly routable IP addresses, which means that by talking to a single public IP and a specific port, you can now communicate with a box that's behind a router with only a private IP available to it. The way that WebRTC works leverages some of these things, but is different. So why don't I actually take that, and we'll do that in the post-show, and I'll go through a bit of how that technology works, because that's another piece to the NDI Remote that we haven't talked about. So let me see. So Eric is asking, is NDI Remote compatible with any computer, or do we need to have a computer with NVIDIA graphics card? So as far as I know, it will work with any computer, but we really haven't tested that. So that's not me giving you a firm yes. That's, I believe, based on what I've heard, but that would be something that's definitely worth testing. So actually, since we are running through questions here, why don't we end the show, and we'll jump into the post-show, and we'll talk about everything there and pick this up. So thank you, everyone, for joining. We will be back again next week with another show. So if I don't see you in your post-show, have a great week, and we'll see you then. Take care. Okay, welcome back to the post-show. Thank you all who have decided to stick around. So let me go back, because we were talking about a lot of really good things here, and I want to sort of pick up where we were going. So Jesse Cole, thank you. Jesse's throwing out some use cases. So yes, a cheap remote camera for a sports venue. So that could definitely work well. You could use it for security cameras. I mean, it could be that sort of thing as well. So yeah, I get exactly the angle that Jesse's coming from on this. So yeah, anything that you actually just want to have a lightweight impromptu camera setup or a temporary camera setup, you could definitely use that. So something different use cases, but I think if you have other options, you probably will have more control over that. And in a live setting, those types of controls are, a real security blanket, because things will go wrong, as you saw here with some of the connections we tried to make. But let me go back, because we were talking before we wrapped the show about NATs and the connectivity model here. So WebRTC works in an interesting way. Everybody talks about WebRTC as a peer-to-peer connection protocol, which at one level it is, but it doesn't do that alone. So if you have two locations that are going to be handling WebRTC, for them to connect, there needs to be a third-party system somewhere in this now that will handle establishing that initial connection. And that's called a signaling server. And the whole process of signaling is custom to everybody. There's no standard in WebRTC for signaling itself. So typically what will happen is the front ends of both of these, let's say it's two browsers, and that's web code, so it's some sort of JavaScript that's using the WebRTC stack inside the browsers. They will describe where that signal is and be able to interpret the messages coming from that to go to the next level, which is basically negotiating how they want to talk to each other at a audio-video level. So that's really called the ICE conversation. It's how that connection is made between those two. And in that, what will be negotiated is what resolution, what frame rate, what codec is going to be used for audio, for video. In addition to that negotiation, there's also communication that goes on around something called a stun server, which basically figures out or tries to figure out the IP addresses that would allow a connection, a WebRTC connection, to occur. And so those stun servers are going to be looking for IP addresses that both are advertising, that have specific ports open, that would allow all the different protocols that need to communicate. And that's a whole negotiation that takes place. They usually can resolve that. And at that point, what they're going to do is that signaling server will tell both sides of the conversation, here's the IP address and the port of the other side that you need to start talking to. There are still occasions, though, especially in corporate spaces where there are firewalls or other types of complex network infrastructure, where that isn't possible. There isn't a public-facing IP that would allow all of those conversations and protocols to take place as needed. In those cases, the stun server sort of falls back to something called a turn server or a relay server. And if you notice over here on the UI for NDI Remote, they have a little gear on the bottom that says turn on relay server. So what this lets you do is new tech, or Viz through NDI.TV, will provide the stun server, they'll provide all the signaling. But if you need to fall back and go to what they call a turn server, that's something you'll have to provide yourself. And there's a reason for that. What the turn server does is, when it can't make those connections directly between the two and establish something, what it will do is it will relay messages between both of these systems. So you, in a turn server, will now take the video from point A, you will ingest it and send it down to point B. So it can be very expensive, because that bandwidth is being utilized now off of whoever owns the turn server and their infrastructure. So this is probably the reason, it's a scale reason why NewTek decided that people could deploy their own turn servers. There's also a very positive thing with that, and that is it provides more security, because one of the nice things about WebRTC is that peer-to-peer nature, where nobody else could eavesdrop on that conversation in either direction. So by letting people host their own turn servers, you now have the ability to maintain that security. So if you were an organization that had strict security guidelines, you would be able to enforce all of those within your own organizational infrastructure and still run a turn server that could help route people into your organization. So there's the network address translation, that really is a very small type of dimension to this. WebRTC and that whole initiation protocol is much deeper, and actually is something that is incredibly robust, considering how many different moving parts there are in the establishment of a connection. So hopefully that explains some of this in a little more detail here. So I know that we didn't have everything work, but hopefully everything that we showed now at least makes sense, and you can start playing with this on your own. I think, and this is not disparaging anything, because what's in NDI 5 is incredibly powerful and incredibly big leap forward. But I would, for any of these key technologies, the new ones that are being introduced, I would approach them as if they were beta software and use them in situations where if you do have a failure, you have a plan B in place, because they are still maturing and evolving. And NewTek has been very open about this, how they're they're trying to stomp out anything that people come back with, and they're incredibly responsive with these things. But just the fact that I'm using this here to demonstrate things, I think just take this as this is an indication of potentially really great things that are coming down the pipe with NDI 5. So hopefully that puts the qualifier on this, because I think that's important. I don't want to mislead anybody into using something and then have it not perform the way you expected, at least as reliably as you expected during a production. So, Mady the Great, Mady, good evening to you too. I'm glad you were able to join us. We spent time talking about NDI Remote. So, as I mentioned, NDI Remote is really the real lightweight version of what people will be using NDI Bridge for. And as of right now, the last download that we have, we don't have access to the host model yet for receiver and host for Bridge. But as soon as we get that, we're going to definitely jump in and do a show on that. But this is definitely in that same camp. It's one of these things where it's evolving, but I think these are really great complementary technologies. Bridge requires infrastructure on both sides. You have to have systems there. You have to have a lot of pre-planning. Remote is as easy as sending somebody a link if you need them to send you a camera feed. So that is why I think both of them are in there. Each plays a role sort of in a production workflow, and I think that's great. So if there are no more questions, I think we can wrap up the post show. I know we actually talked about a lot of things during the show itself. So we sort of did some different we did some different things at the end of the show that we'd usually do post show. But I think we've covered everything. So let's see. So Mady's saying your voice is different today. So it says no low end, like a megaphone. So I'm not sure why you're hearing that. I mean, if other people are having trouble, please let us know. And you don't have to do it live on the show. You can also do it, in the comments after the show. We're always trying to improve and change things here, which can be a blessing and a curse for us. So hopefully we didn't do something that broke audio. But if we did, we'll take a look at that after the show today. So thank you, Mady. So Samuel Nordvik, have you used NDI Audio Direct? It seems like an interesting solution. So I have played with it. So we are also planning on doing a show on NDI Audio Direct. I need to learn a bit more, because NDI Audio Direct are VST plugins that allow you to take NDI audio in and out of your typical digital audio workstation. So it's really powerful that way. We are trying to figure out how to package that in a show. So definitely something you can expect will be coming. It is on our editorial calendar, probably for a show in September. But if we can get to it earlier than that and everything comes together, we'll certainly get a show up there for you on that. So it's okay. So Lake Cam, he's saying he's hearing the low end. So I'm not sure. I mean, it may be something in different streams you have going out. So we'll also check on that. But so hopefully everybody found this useful and interesting, and this will get you jump started a bit with more of the NDI tool set. So if there are no more questions, I just want to say thank you all for sticking around and for joining us both for the show and the post show. And we'll see you all next week with another show. Take care. Be safe. Bye.